Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about the 1974 comedy, and I use that term loosely, Throw Out the Anchor. You may notice that the poster promises both that the film is hilarious and that you'll laugh from stem to stern. Evidently, racial stereotypes, cracks about women's lib, and drunk people falling over were a lot funnier 50 years ago than they are today. In any case, the film introduces us to the Porterfield family. This consists of widower Jonathan, his son, who doesn't matter to the movie's events at all, and his daughter, who has one plot-relevant moment and gives us some exposition, but is otherwise pretty much as extraneous as the son. The trio are in Florida because Jonathan booked a family holiday on a houseboat. Unfortunately, he booked it 8 months earlier, and the lush who owns the boat has drunk the money rather than use it to get it ready for use. The Porterfields, however, aren't easily dissuaded, and they basically seize possession of other boats in the marina, refusing to leave until the locals agree to fix up a vessel for them. Somehow, this extortion leads to bonding between the newcomers and their hosts, which means that when evil businessmen attempt to drive them all out in order to build a road through their properties, the Porterfields decide to help the locals fight back. Hijinks, though not exactly hilarious ones, ensue. So Throw Out the Anchor is written, directed and produced by John Hugh, a talent agent and occasional actor. He has a bit part in this film, in fact. It's the only film he ever wrote, the only film he ever directed, and the only film he ever produced. And it's certainly not hard to believe that this movie was written and directed by a novice to the craft. And there's little to suggest that we missed out by him not making any further films. Throw Out the Anchor is pretty bad, frankly, and not very comedy with a weak plot. And I almost didn't make a video about it because, I sometimes don't generally for movies that are just blah and dull and simply give me nothing much to talk about. But on reflection, I realised that there were a few things worth calling out about this film, hence this video. So, The Apple Dumpling Gang was a Disney film set in the Old West in which 3 orphans arrive in their new hometown, put all the locals offside with their antics, but then ultimately help the town deal with a gang of outlaws, finding a new family and a new home in the process. And if it wasn't for the fact that The Apple Dumpling Gang came out in 1975, the year after this movie, I'd be tempted to wonder if Throw Out the Anchor was deliberately trying to evoke the same energy in a cost-saving contemporary setting. It has 3 newcomers arriving in town, initially causing all kinds of disruption and upset, but ultimately they help the locals from an outside threat. However, it appears the similarity is coincidental, and this kind of parallel creation does happen quite a lot in Hollywood, perhaps unsurprisingly given the sheer amount of cinematic content that is produced. There's no qualitative comparison, of course. The Apple Dumpling Gang is a much more engaging and better film, and probably also at times funny. Now, one of the major issues with this film is that the evil businessmen are thoroughly unmotivated, incompetent antagonists. They have no clear reasons for their villainy, and then they give up at the first sign of resistance, even though it seems like they should easily be able to overcome it. And I can forgive the fact that the script never bothers to explain why the evil businessmen want to build their road. You could even argue that the lack of a clear purpose for the road is an intentional decision. The 70s were a time of considerable economic hardship and dislocation, and a lot of people were deeply suspicious of both government and big business as a result. And then we got to the 80s, where rampant amoral greed became to be seen as a positive by some people. Such is life. It's the ease with which the big businessmen give up on their scheme that is the bigger problem. They cave immediately after the Porterfields help steal their earth-moving equipment, despite, the fact that big equipment like that should be pretty easy to find, and they could presumably have whoever took it arrested. That's just all too hard. Better just call the whole thing off, I guess. Now, to a considerable extent, heroes are only as impressive as the villains they overcome. Comedies can play a bit fast and loose with that principle because we're generally more generous when we're in a good mood, but that, of course, requires the comedy to be funny. And as I alluded to at the beginning of this video, Throw Out the Anchor's idea of humour is racial stereotypes, cracks about women's lib, and drunk people falling over. And honestly, that kind of crass, blatant, punch-down comedy was quite prevalent back in the 70s and 80s. I remember the sitcom Mind Your Language on British television, which started in 1977, ran for 4 years, and was basically just 25 minutes of racist caricatures per episode. Things aren't perfect even now, of course. We can still see this kind of punch-down content, particularly targeting transgender people in recent years. And there are probably even still people who would laugh at this kind of material. But I'm certainly not among them, and I think their numbers are dwindling. And unfortunately, these are almost the only kinds of humour the film has to offer. The only other real kind is a surprising amount of sleazy, smutty innuendo, which I can only assume the MPAA somehow overlooked as the film got a G rating. So yeah, throw out the movie, not just the anchor. This is not good. Next time, the first of Ralph Bakshi's 3 attempts to make an animated fantasy epic, the surrealistic Fairies vs. Mutants future war that is 1977's Wizards. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.